if you are a journalist who does that and you ask me and I later see your headline in the media with Sharkwatch photographic evidence, I will know who you are and I will put you to the back of the queue. People genuinely do get caught up in the media circus, regardless of whether or not there's authentic and accurate reporting that I'm trying to convey on my end, being the sole manager of Sharkwatch. People are still falling under this mindset of fear and anxiety. And that's something that for me was so concerning because I'm trying to steer a narrative that is of appreciation, fascination, awareness, ocean conservation. And then as soon as the media circus joined the party, that's further getting exemplified in the wrong direction.
A couple of years ago, we did a survey with surfers. A lot of them were based in the US. We had some from Australia as well. And surfers don't have a high fear of sharks for the most part. Most of them have a lower fear of sharks than the general population. Interestingly, what we found is actually so many of the surfers, they spend so much time in the water. They've had positive or neutral experiences with sharks. So a lot of them have seen sharks.
Yeah.
And so they have this like familiarity, I guess, almost anchor point where they're like, yeah, we see sharks and it's fine. Whereas other people who have never seen a shark, their mind goes to, if I go in the ocean, I'm going to see a shark and it's going to bite me. Like that,
yeah,
that's just where their mind goes. The term biophilia is a little bit more specifically around an idea that we as humans have an evolutionary predisposition to love nature. It kind of suggests that it's something that we need, not just something that we want. And biophobia it's not the exact opposite, but it's essentially a dislike of nature or a fear of nature as well.
All right, it's the 15th of July, 2025. Brianna, I've had the busiest day probably of my life today, in all honesty. I've been up at 5 and then from there had a pretty challenging day at work doing the labouring stuff. And then from there went down to film the introduction of my Sharkwatch documentary. We also came across a few different marine mortalities that's obviously related to the unfolding algae bloom. And then that just segued into a national news interview over Zoom. And I'm back on Zoom again. And I've got probably the biggest guest with me, folks, Brianna Le Busque. She's a lecturer at STEM, and she's an environmental scientist focusing on conservation psychology and biophobia and biophilia. How are you, Brianna?
I'm good, thanks, Anton. Thanks for having me on.
You're most welcome. It's an honor. This is obviously a premier Sharkwatch event because of your background and who you are as a person. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and apart from all of the academic pathways you've gone down, who are you inside out? Tell us a bit about yourself and your background and how you became this really, I guess, valued asset in the whole shark research field today.
Yeah. So I guess about me. So as you said, yeah, I'm a lecturer in environmental sciences at UniSA. And I spend a lot of my time teaching at uni, but also researching, particularly around fear of sharks, which I know we'll get into. Outside of that, though, I'm also a mum to a toddler. He's almost 2. So that keeps me very busy. And also, like so many of us here in SA, love spending time down the beach. And, it's definitely a hard time for all of us at the moment with the algal bloom as well. But yeah, in terms of how I got to where I am, do you want me to talk about that now?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
Yeah. So a bit of a random journey. So straight from school, it was probably in year 11 and year 12, I realized I really liked psychology. I found it super interesting. I've always loved trying to figure out why people do what they do and all of that sort of stuff. So I loved that at school and thought that's the path I want to do at uni, and I went straight into my psychology degree, and I thought I would be a clinical psychologist because I thought that's all you could be with a psychology degree. But kind of probably in my second and third year of my degree, I did a bit of volunteering in the clinical psych space, and I was like, that's not really for me. I don't think I want to go down that psychology practicing road, but I still love understanding people, and that's still where my passion is. And then I sort of discovered about the research side of psychology, and I went and did my honors in conservation psychology, not in the shark space yet. It was looking more at people's personality and how that impacts how they interact with nature. And I just fell in love with that space. It's something I had no idea it was an area, something I could do. And then I went into my PhD, and that's when I fell into the fear of shark world. And I have been researching that for it's getting close to 10 years now, and it's just I love it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you become a mentor to your students as well. From what I've come to understand, you really have been able to build a deep connection with your students. And I guess, could you say that your journey, and particularly going down a bit of a left field route, obviously you're talking about not fitting into that clinical space, but then fitting in with, what became an important part of your upbringing. You love the water, you love the ocean. Do you carry that now to your students? You try and tell them, look, I mean, if you're going to go down any sort of route, particularly go down something that you're fascinated with, go and venture into that space because the possibilities can be endless.
100%. I think particularly now that I teach in environmental science, and it's an area that it's a bit challenging at the moment. You know, we have students coming in and we talk about heavy things like climate change and the algal bloom and those sorts of things. And we need our students to be passionate. It's not the type of job that you can come in and not do if you don't love it. So it's definitely something that I share with my students and try to instill with them. And then with some of my research students, I've got some PhD students of my own now, and really trying to I guess they also work in that social science aspect, and we're really passionate about that because we're still a little bit fish out of water when it comes to environmental scientists. We're not in a lab, we don't have microscopes, we're doing something a little bit different, but it's really important as well. So getting the passion across that way as well.
So when I first heard about you, Brianna, I'm not too familiar with a lot of the different really academic superstars here in South Australia, particularly when it comes to um, any of those who are based around the water and their fields. But when I was doing an interview for ABC recently, the cameraman actually referred me to you. And I thought that was perfect timing because this was when the algae bloom was all unfolding, right? So at that time, we're seeing all these sharks washing up at the beaches. We're seeing all of the videography of them being documented close to shore at Maslin's Beach, obviously the one at Aldinga over the AFL Gather Round weekend. So that sort of really spiraled my content, and I was getting millions of views, not only from South Australia and the rest of the country, but also on an international scale. And of course, when there's anything to do with sharks, as you've probably come to understand, it really is a heavily, I guess, polluted in sort of climate to navigate around in terms of the wording, the media environment, and it becomes very challenging on my end. I mean, Sharkwatch originally started as a fascination and an awareness for sharks, that when we have a platform that broadcasts photographic evidence and documentations of sharks in South Australian waters, through that, providing there's the right logical reasoning that's applied to that, then the ultimate end outcome is to have people appreciate sharks, right? And appreciate the environment and get a better understanding into shark biology here in South Australia. Unfortunately, this has been an area that I myself I guess, have found very challenging to try and steer a particular agenda um, in the right ethical direction
Mm,
because of the media environment that is the media landscape that is so polluted. And it's unfortunate that um, Sharkwatch gets painted
mm,
just initially by a lot of people who will come across my content, users from around the world looking at these viral posts. They they see this Sharkwatch outlet, they see my genuine reporting, and it's like they've already got a preconceived mindset that there is going to be sensationalism driven
mm,
across, trying to be driven through that post, and they'll comment things like a shark in the ocean. Who would have thought? And your general, I guess, criticism that comes with that comes with any sort of media agency that is associated with that sort of sensationalism. And I'm not by any means bagging that sort of. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong that people comment that sort of wording. And look, I mean, I think it's important as well that these media agencies are pulled up on that.
mhm.
To an extent, I'm a big advocate of freedom of speech. People have the right to have their own opinion. But it's obviously just as important that we're mitigating fear, and we're also, I guess, trying to have the best possible ethical practices that's going to avoid that stereotype from being under that stereotype. So that's why I found your particular field of expertise so important, and I'm very grateful that it came across you for the background that you have. And over the years that I've been managing Sharkwatch myself, 11 years now, I've actually been able to identify certain trends where,
Mm,
say, you have, spring and summer approaching, more people going down to the beaches, the weather's getting warmer. It's favorable conditions to go for a swim, to go for a kayak, to go for a snorkel or a surf. So, in that regard, in these times, you do anecdotally get a higher number of shark sightings just by those factors. And with that, it comes the whole, I guess, flood of media documentations, photographic evidence, video evidence, and so on and so forth. And with that, I've noticed there's a trend where people genuinely do get caught up in the media circuits, regardless of whether or not there's authentic and accurate reporting that I'm trying to convey on my end, being the sole manager of Sharkwatch. People are still falling under this mindset of fear and anxiety, and that's something that for me was so concerning, because I'm trying to steer a narrative that is of appreciation, fascination, awareness, ocean conservation. And then as soon as the media circus join the party, that's further getting exemplified in the wrong direction. So that's enough with my rambling. But Bree, can you, with your own observations, with your own studies, with your research and what you've been keeping a close eye on, can you, I guess, find some sort of relatability to what I'm saying?
Definitely. I think you raised so many interesting points. I think the first one is that continued blurring between traditional media and social media. And it's not only happening in the shark world, I've done research in social media a bit more broadly as well. But I think to your point, it's really interesting. A lot of the research I've looked at where I've analyzed news media coming from traditional news media outlets, there is often these sort of fluff stories where, there's a shark in the water or there's a fisher that takes a video of a shark. And when that's posted by the news media, which still, for better or worse, holds sort of weight and credibility and those sorts of things, we do know that that can essentially, the more we hear about something in that context, the more likely we think it is. And so when it comes to the traditional media talking about sharks, we know that when a shark bite happens, which they're rare and they're really horrific and they are newsworthy, of course, and it makes sense that a traditional news media will post about that and report on that. But it doesn't really make sense that our national news is also reporting about a shark just swimming in the ocean. That kind of does seem um, irrelevant to that traditional
Absolutely,
news.
absolutely. That's just standard behavior of a shark every day.
Exactly. And that's where you get, the classic comment, like you said, oh, sharks in the ocean, groundbreaking. But where we also know from shark research, and particularly from the shark scientists, the Flinders Uni crew that do so much amazing work on shark bite mitigation and things, one of the really good strategies around that is if we know there is a certain shark in a particular area, letting people in that area know about that. Like that is a really important safety mitigation technique that we have. And that's where, I've followed Shark Watch for a long time because that's where it is really important what you're doing there, where people need to be educated and need to know that. And people need to be able to make their own, I guess, risk calculation about that. But
Yeah.
I think that's where it's hard. And I know, you and I have talked about this as well, but it's a hard one because I think people kind of put Shark Watch and other types of social media in the same bucket as traditional media, but it's two separate things, and we need to think about it as two separate things.
It's a fine line because for my field of reporting, I want my organization to be represented or to be seen and viewed as an organization that is promoting fascination for
Mm-hmm.
sharks, awareness, education, and appreciation. But on the same twofold token, it's also an attack mitigation or a bite mitigation strategy, or it can be used in that way, providing its information is delivered in a timely manner. For example, if I get a boater who's a kilometre off Grange Beach, for example,
Mm-hmm.
now my biggest demographical following is from the Adelaide metropolitan region.
Yeah.
So that's where it becomes it becomes a real game changer in that way. So if there's for example, a boater that's a kilometre off Grange Beach, no one's generally going to see a shark fin a kilometre offshore, if
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's submerged underwater. But that boater has a particular vantage point that's useful in that sense. So if that boater provides the video evidence or photographic evidence to me within a minute of him seeing that shark, within 5 odd minutes of me seeing that, I'll have a report up, and
Mm-hmm.
that's feeding to 100,000 people. Now, at least 5, 10, 20, I don't know how many people, 5Ks away at Henley Beach, swimmers could then make their own sort of informed decision to warn their friends who are in the water, hey, like I know there's no patrols currently active. There's a shark that's literally a kilometre away heading in our direction. We can get out of the water. Within 10 minutes, it's a highly effective mitigation strategy. So what I'm trying to say is when in that way, I also have to provide wording that
Yeah.
says this is a matter of urgency. And I
Yeah.
think this is where people do get caught up in the whole okay, you're a fear mongering campaign, and I get it. I do understand that, but there is also a degree of urgency, and I think it comes down to the wording and things of that nature as well. When you're talking about the fluff media reports, I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to say that that triggered something in my mind, and I want to use this space as well to just let all of you journalists know, because I know that a lot of you watch. If you are a journalist, because I've had this before, where you've asked to share my content or our content that you've seen on Shark Watch, if you then want to take the wording out of proportion. For example, I had a shark in Marion Bay uh, only in March or April when the bloom started really having evidence being shown. And this journalist, she or he took the photo off or the video off my page, and they labeled that shark, which was a barely a 2 meter juvenile, barely a two, must have been a 6 or 7 foot shark. That, mind you, has had like nearly, I think, like 2 million views around the world.
Wow.
Something quite incredible. Um, that shark was labeled a 4 meter monster,
Hmm.
and this shark was only 1.5 to 2 meters. It was a bub, and it was literally
Hmm.
just having a little frolic in the shallows. So, um, if you are a journalist who does that, and you ask me, and I later see your headline in the media with Sharkwatch photographic evidence, I will note who you are and I will put you to the back of the queue in case you ever want to publicize my content again. So, look, that's me putting my foot down as well because I don't want to be affiliated with that sort of journalism. So, I just wanted to put that out there. But I think what we should go down, or the pathway we should go down steering this conversation, is talking a bit more about what exactly is biophobia and what is
Mhm.
biophilia, and what have you discovered in this space?
Yeah, so biophilia is essentially people's love of nature. But the term biophilia is a little bit more specifically around an idea that we as humans have an evolutionary predisposition to love nature. It kind of suggests that it's something that we need, not just something that we want. And biophobia is it's not the exact opposite, but it's essentially a dislike of nature or a fear of nature as well. And so biophilia is, and a lot of the work I've done in that space, it's important because it's important for the environment. Basically, the more people like an environment or a particular ecosystem, the more they try to protect it. But it's also really great for people. There's a lot of mental health benefits and physical benefits. I've done work where we've even got first year students at uni to spend some time studying in nature, and that can have stress. They'll feel less stressed about exams or things like that. That's sort of a really, I guess, simple and basic explanation of that. But with biophilia as well, there's been a real, I guess, increase in research around blue space and the importance of blue space and how it doesn't have to be the ocean. It can be lakes or rivers and things, but particularly in somewhere like Adelaide, most of us live quite close to the beaches and how fundamentally important that is for our physical and mental well-being as well. And then I guess the biophobia aspect and where I focus on is not just sharks, but it's my main area. But essentially, if someone's afraid of something or dislike something, they are less likely to want to conserve it. In the case of sharks, we know that people who have really strong fear of sharks are also more likely to support things like shark culls or those sorts of lethal mitigation techniques. But more broadly as well, it also again can then impact their relationship with the ocean in particular. And because we know being in the ocean is good for us, if people aren't going in the ocean, they're not getting those positive impacts. So when I first started researching in this space and was doing my PhD on shark conservation specifically, I was really focused on how this impacts people's conservation of sharks. But that has morphed into that's still a really important element, but also morphed into actually how we can make it better for people as well, because we want to build this strong connection for people for mental and physical well-being.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So we ideally want to. Where do you think that void of, sorry, or where do you think that that biophobia stems from? Are you noticing correlations or trends that tend to have people become more biophobic, if that's the right word? So, for example, you were talking about those who fear sharks. Would these be people who tend to have less knowledge about sharks? Are these people who spend less time around the ocean environment? What's the general demographic or consensus, if you will, or the trend that you've noticed in regards to people who suffer from biophobia?
Such a good question. So Biophobia broadly, we know because biophobia can be, in general, people might just have a fear of the environment or a dislike of the environment broadly. And we know that, or researchers sort of theorize that, increased urbanization, people are spending less time in natural environments and things like that. And that's contributing to that broadly. With sharks, it's very interesting. I often say, if I was to put one question up on my office wall that I hope to answer in my whole career, it would be unpacking this fear of sharks because it's really interesting and complex. So, of course, there is an evolutionary component to fear and particularly fear of sharks. We know that some species, it's only a handful, but some species can hurt humans on the rare occasions that they bite. And they also live in the ocean and humans aren't born
Yeah.
with gills.
Who would have thought?
Exactly. Who would have thought?
Sorry, just thought I'd throw that in there.
No, yeah, exactly. And so there is an evolutionary component to the fear. But where it gets really interesting with sharks and with the research that I've done and other researchers have done is the fear is out of proportion to the risk. Like we know the risk is super low, but people in general have quite a high fear of sharks. There's lots of silly pop culture comparisons that are made. You're more likely to die from a vending machine falling on top of you and things like that. But at a broad, like kind of a good comparison is there's other animal species that are more likely to hurt us. In Australia, for example, domestic dogs, there's quite a similar statistic there. People don't have that same fear. And so that's what I've sort of been trying to unpack is, okay, where does this exaggerated fear come from? We know the media has a role in it because particularly as you were saying, those really strong sensationalized types of articles or headlines. So, I've spent a lot of time reading them and some of them are very exaggerated, man-eating monster hunts down person and those sorts of things. That has a role. And films have a role. Jaws does have a role in it, and it always will. It was such a pivotal, huge blockbuster that fundamentally changed how people view sharks.
Yeah.
But an interesting one that you brought up as well is definitely that knowledge component and the familiarity component in particular. So something that my research has found, a couple of years ago, we did a survey with surfers. A lot of them were based in the US. We had some from Australia as well. And surfers don't have a high fear of sharks for the most part. Most of them have a lower fear of sharks than the general population. And when we unpacked that, on the one hand, surfers, particularly surfers that are like the diehard surfers, that they are usually more risk takers in general. They have a lower fear of things broadly. But interestingly, what we found is actually so many of the surfers, they spend so much time in the water. They've had positive or neutral experiences with sharks. So a lot of them have seen sharks.
Yeah.
And so they have this like familiarity, I guess, almost anchor point where they're like, yeah, we see sharks and it's fine. Whereas other people who have never seen a shark, their mind goes to, if I go in the ocean, I'm going to see a shark and it's going to bite me. Like that, that's just where their mind goes.
Yep.
So definitely that knowledge and familiarity plays a role.
That and see, that's fascinating as well in the sense that you can you go down, can you see that from your psychology background and be like, that is the result with, I don't know how to word this properly, right? I don't have a very expansive vocabulary, so to speak, but in your, are you looking at these people and there's something psychologically that there's a trigger with that environment, or there's an association with that environment. If it's the ocean, it's shark. They go straight for the defense mechanism, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Definitely. So we know there is a strong association between ocean and sharks. And as you said, a lot of people's brain, when they think of the ocean, it goes straight to sharks. And that's a really classic way that fear in general can be kind of conditioned, where we kind of associate two things together. And one of the best ways to kind of break that fear or minimize that fear is to have positive experiences with it, or to, to go in the ocean heaps and not see a shark. And then you kind of start to break that association. But because some people, particularly people with a really strong fear, that fear stops them going in the ocean, which of course makes sense. But
Yeah.
so they just maintain that fear because they
Right.
don't go in the
Yeah.
ocean and they don't not see a shark. And so it just spirals more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're stuck in that paradigm essentially of thinking. Yeah.
100%.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this sort of gives me a bit more reassurance with what I do with Shark Watch. We're providing it's curated in the right manner, where there's education there. There's more, how would you say? There's, I guess, the association or the conditioning to seeing a shark swimming in its natural environment. And by the way, I'm not condoning going swimming with sharks. I'm simply saying just the very understanding and the knowledge that they are there far more than we actually think they are. Because I think a lot of us as well, Breeze, that we think, and again, I'm not quoting everyone, but many of us who are subject to that biophobia of sharks,
Hmm.
we, like they would look at the ocean and think, okay, like if there is a shark, almost 90 to 100% risk of an
Yeah.
attack. So when we're conditioning people to make them realize this, they're actually probably around you more than you think. And
Yeah.
again, I'm not condoning you swim with them. You get out of the water right away, especially if it's a dangerous species. Um, but that, I guess, that's what provides that reassurance, that break that can be useful. Because in the same token, my concern was that the government or the state government weren't broadcasting shark sightings. And again, this is just a theory and a concern. I'm not saying that the government was doing this. This is something that I
Mm.
sort of had in my mind. The thought that came to mind was that perhaps they're not telling people about the constant um, presence of sharks because they're looking at it from a fear point of view where they don't want fear to be promoted through the community. But on the same sense, and I get why there's benefits to not amplifying it and publicizing it to that extent. But that's kind of like looking at humans for the most part and saying they're not equipped mentally to deal with the fact that there's a shark in the ocean. So you also have that twofold mindset
Yeah.
that comes into play. You have that other side of the argument. So I think that was definitely important to mention. That like as well, we also don't want the risk to we don't want that lack of information to result in an actual bite because there weren't sufficient enough measures in place. And I've spoken about this multiple times on this platform
Mm.
that I genuinely, like most of you, don't feel like there is enough communication
Mhm.
to the public when it comes to a real-time threat of a shark swimming um, at a metropolitan beach or anywhere else in the state for that matter. So yeah, definitely worth mentioning that.
Yeah, I think that that is such an interesting point that you made where it's one of those things where sometimes it makes sense that we think, oh, well, if we tell people that there are sharks near them, of course that's going to increase fear because that sort of makes sense at an initial level. But exactly right. I think what we did see a bit of a shift in is I don't know, maybe 10-ish years ago, the stories that we would see, or even when so I did a big analysis of news in 2016, so almost 10 years ago. And so many of the stories, and sort of those fluff stories that I mentioned before were things like there's a shark in the ocean, but that was just a shark nowhere near a person. Usually it was someone, taking a footage of a shark on shore or a fisher with a shark or something. But I think there was a bit of a turning point Shark Watch, you do a few other things on social media where we did start to see footage of sharks swimming near surfers. Often that's often what the footage is.
Yeah.
And I definitely saw some shift in yeah, the comments and things where although you would think that's going to make people more afraid, it actually made people be like, oh, but the shark's not doing anything. And so it kind of gave us this counterpoint where prior to that, I think, as you said, people thought, well, if there's a shark in the area, it is going to come straight for a person and it is going to bite a person. But we started to get this evidence that that's not the case. And we started to visually see that. And it's something that scientists knew for a long time. But I guess getting those, particularly some of the beautiful drone shots, and it's such
Yeah.
lovely footage. I think it has started to shift and people are starting to understand that shark behavior a bit more.
Yeah, yeah, and the drones I think is the big talking point in regards to that matter. That's been the game changer. It's
Yeah.
the drones,
Yeah.
especially because you've got the aerial vantage point where
Hmm.
you're not necessarily intruding on what's happening in that very moment. You have a
Yeah.
very raw and intimate, undisturbed
Hmm.
observation of what that shark is doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't know it's on camera, and
Exactly.
the surfer or the swimmer doesn't
Yeah.
know it's there. So
Yeah.
it's a very raw and insightful
Yeah.
piece of piece of equipment that we can have in telling the true narrative story,
Exactly.
true tale.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, did you have anything else you wanted to add to your research in regards to what you found?
Yeah. The psychological fear of sharks. There's
Yeah,
a few. I think another interesting thing that I've started to look into a bit more. And again, we've seen it sort of through the media and things, but also that there is the fear of sharks definitely gets generalized from white sharks to other shark species, which is quite interesting. And it's interesting because I guess, I'm from SA. I've always grown up in SA. And so we're in SA, we're very used to hearing about white sharks because it is a species that we get here. But the more I've sort of talked to other scientists and traveled to my research and things, lots of other places, they don't really get white sharks, or white sharks are definitely not the common species that they get, but it's still top of mind for people. It's still, people think, I'm gonna go in the ocean, I'm definitely gonna see a shark, and it's definitely gonna be a white shark, which, the chance of that is super low. From a psych perspective, it's really interesting because we know that with fear, that can be generalized. So back in, I think it was the 60s, there was a really famous, it's infamous experiment now where some researchers basically conditioned a baby to be afraid of a white rat by making a really loud noise every time the baby saw a rat. But then what was really interesting is they found that without doing any conditioning, that baby automatically was afraid of white rabbits and was afraid of even a Santa Claus mask that had like the white fluffy beard because it looked like the rats.
yeah,
And so it started to show us from a psychology perspective that the fear can be really generalized. And that's what we can see happening with sharks, which is super interesting because I've even, anecdotally, I've talked to people and they're afraid of wobbegongs and Port Jackson sharks and these species that, they can't hurt us, or if, maybe if we stepped on them, they might take a nibble or something. But um it's interesting as well because that I think that there's lots of reasons, and in part, I'm doing an updated analysis on shark films at the moment, and white sharks are overwhelmingly the species that are shown in like horror films about sharks and things. So it's just the things that we hear about a lot, but I think it's an important thing that we're kind of working on in the science space at the moment is, yeah, trying to understand how we can, I guess, get knowledge out about other shark species. Especially there are so many shark species that are really endangered that cannot hurt us, and they still get some of the bad conservation rap that white sharks get. So that's been, yeah, that's been an interesting one. I think I've been doing a bit of work on it at the moment, so it's top of mind for me, but it's something I'm finding really interesting at the moment.
yeah. And I wonder if that all has a role to play in terms of the shark fin trade as well.
Yeah.
things like delicacies like shark fin soup, for example. Like we've heard,
Mhm.
obviously, the ridiculous figures that 100 million sharks are killed per year,
Mhm.
and the fact that a lot of that is from the shark fin trade itself.
Yeah.
And with that, I guess there's the possibility that our fear of sharks, because of movies such as Jaws,
Mhm.
Deep Blue, all of these fictional
Mhm.
movies, have
Mhm.
created this sort of
Yeah, this false narrative, and I think, like you mentioned before, it's just that's what goes top of mind for people now. Like we know that when you say sharks, and I've done this a lot, with sorry, he's gonna he's gonna sit in the background.
yeah,
Um,
it's beauty.
I quite often in my surveys, I one of the items I use is how would you describe sharks in 3 words, for example, and white is always one of the really common responses, just because it is top of mind for people.
Yeah, yeah. And back what I was saying as well, it creates this almost this typical narrative that perhaps if the man eats the shark fin,
Mm-hmm.
it almost makes him look like he's some sort of warrior or some sort of
Mm-hmm.
big macho um, man who overcame the shark. Uh, that I
Mm-hmm.
could be entirely wrong about that, but I do wonder if that plays a part in it. That where man looks at shark like it's some sort of it's idolized to the point where um, it's idolized in the wrong sense of the fear, where it's acceptable and it's okay to kill sharks and to eat sharks because they're killing mankind, which is obviously uh,
Mm-hmm.
completely false and untrue. But
Mm-hmm.
you get the feeling that these countries that sort of have it as a delicacy could look at it in that sense. So where to from here, Brianna, for the rest of this year and academically?
Mm.
What sort of amazing events have you been invited to, and where do you see your career path progressing now? How has um, your academic pathway in psychology evolved over the years?
Yes, it's evolved so much. I think even I don't know, maybe even 5 years ago, I could never have imagined being a lecturer and program director of environmental sciences. I feel like that's since moving into the science faculty at uni in particular, it's just opened up a lot of doors, and I'm collaborating with so many more diversity of scientists, and I think that that's really exciting. And there's a lot of really cool projects, truly interdisciplinary projects, where I guess there's me as a social scientist, and we have marine biologists and oceanographers and a whole range of other people who are really smart at all of those sorts of things. And it's really complementary, which is really amazing. I think an interesting one for this year, I know you're obviously talking about it so much and it's all over Instagram and things, but I think the algal bloom is just such a it's such a pivotal time for us here in South Australia, particularly in the marine science space. And it's quite interesting, even where we've got a science communication event next week down at Galway, where locals or the public can come and ask science questions, and we're already getting so much around the algal bloom. And I mean, of course we are, but it's just such it's on the top of everyone's mind. But I think kind of to what we spoke about before about the biophilia, that's definitely being impacted by this algal bloom. And I have a survey going at the moment exploring how it's impacting people, from in terms of things like, are they feeling anxious about it, and are they feeling, sad about it, and those sorts of things. But a really interesting, I haven't analyzed the data yet, it's still ongoing, but a really interesting thing just from eyeballing it is people have stopped going in the ocean, of course, because it's currently not safe. But you know, one of the participants said that they are a surfer and they used to go in the ocean every day, and they haven't been in the ocean since March. And that's just something that has so many impacts on not only biophilia, but also that's outlet, right? Like, we all like to do
Yeah.
something, and it's
Yeah.
and so I think myself and a lot of other marine scientists in SA are doing what we can, I guess, our little bits to that, and how we can understand what has happened and try to avoid it happening again. So I think that's a really key thing happening this year. And from a shark perspective, it's quite interesting because seeing sharks, especially white sharks, washed up on metropolitan beaches is just something that people haven't experienced. But also, what we've seen with that is a lot of the comments have been positive, not positive about the algal bloom, but positive about sharks, right? Like, people are actually now worried about sharks. And it's kind of this interesting flip, which is something that I'm definitely going to be
Wow.
keeping an eye on from the fear of shark perspective. So yeah, those are some exciting things. And we've got National Science Week coming up in August, where I always get out and try to do a bit. I'll have a couple of radio interviews, I think, talking about sharks, which is awesome. And I'll be down in Hobart. They have an amazing science week down there where they've got heaps of things, like Dr. Carl's down there, heaps of different people. But the thing I'm involved in, which should be fun, is it's basically a pub where there's scientists, and then anyone can come up and ask questions to the scientists. And I'm going to try to make a fear of sharkometer or something where people can kind of say how afraid of sharks they are, and then we can discuss that. So yeah, some fun things coming up.
Yeah, that's exciting. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, the whole obviously situation with the algae bloom is just rapidly evolving every day, and it's not something that is precedented in terms of its destruction.
Yeah.
And we don't know where this is going to lead us in relation to sharks and things of that nature. And the trend that you mentioned, where there's possibly any sort of positive outcome that could be taken from this, is a fact that maybe people's perception of sharks is going to change in that regard. And it very well could get to the point where, come December, November, we may not even have any sharks in the Gulf to report on, which would be absolutely tragic.
Yeah.
And that further testifies that a healthy ocean needs sharks. So it's huge in that way. And the reason why I got in contact with you, Bree, at the start of the year or earlier, was because that was when the algae bloom was just beginning, and I don't think it was to the point of where it is today.
Yeah.
And I wanted to discuss these mitigation and these fear measures to be put in place for the coming summer, just thinking that it was going to be business as usual.
Yeah.
I was, going to be expecting maybe a couple of 100,000 followers to be on the Sharkwatch platform by that time, and to have, multitudes of people in the water enjoying snorkeling, reef systems, kayaking, and how do we, manage shark sighting information and the rapid flow of shark sighting information with a growing demographic of users. So now the whole conversation has changed entirely and completely, and it's about managing people's mental health in regards to the algae bloom situation. Obviously, I have your survey up on the bio of my Instagram, so I do hope that gets you some traffic. And it's been an amazing, you've become a really important asset now and resource to Sharkwatch, an individual. So, I'm glad that you have viewed Sharkwatch with some sort of positive, because I wasn't entirely sure prior to meeting you whether or not you were fond of my work. And I'm just very grateful that you've had a positive reception. We've had a positive reception, and I do hope this unfolds into a collaborative working relationship. And anything to do with sharks, whether you have papers that come out, whether you have events that you're going to be attending, let me know, and I will be open to promoting it on Sharkwatch. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. And it looks like I've put your dog to sleep in the back there, but
he's so used to me talking about sharks. He's like, oh, sharks again. Fall asleep.
Oh, at least he doesn't fear sharks. So
no.
Excellent. So we'll leave it there for tonight, and I'll let you get back to your busy life, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Yes, thanks so much, Anton. Have a good night.
If you enjoyed that content, if you really like listening to the Sharks Cast, and you want to help out Sharkwatch, you want to support what I'm doing, you want to see this project continue to expand and grow and get to a whole bunch of exciting new levels that allow us to unlock more resources, potentially more technology, more experts to have on this Sharkwatch project, why not become an exclusive crew website member? In doing that, you'll have access to direct text shark alerts to your phone in times where there's a shark sighting that has taken place. You'll have discount on merch. You'll have access to exclusive networking events. That's something that's in the pipeline, where I plan to actually partner up with the local tourism organizations to get all of us out as like a big family on the water, having these awesome networking days where we're chatting to one another, exploring different possibilities when it comes to shark safety out in the water, and also just exploring an immersive experience in our local waterways is going to help our confidence and other people around us, whether we have family and friends that's been affected by the trauma of a shark attack, that just invites a more collaborative experience to overcome these life hurdles and challenges from not having secure mitigation measures in place. That's what Sharkwatch is there for. It's to provide awareness for shark safety, and also it's to become a real personal asset to your own journeys out on local waterways. So become an exclusive crew member. The link to the actual website memberships and the plans and pricing is in the follow-up segment of the end of this video here. So stay tuned. I'll also probably put it in the link of this video, so that way you have access to it without excuse. Jump on board and become an exclusive crew Sharkwatch member today. You're going to help grow the Sharkwatch project. We're going to reach new heights, and it's just, God willing, going to be an exciting new way that we can commercialize this project that's going to benefit you, right? And a whole bunch of other water users, coastal offshore water users. We're just a whole bunch of South Australian water lovers, ocean lovers, marine lovers who love our marine ecosystem and want to dive deeper into these matters and explore new solutions. That's what Sharkwatch is there for. We're that new innovative solution. So jump on board today.